My name is Doug Halpin, and this is Windswept Worm Farm. So many people have asked us to come out and visit our worm farm that we decided to put a virtual tour together to put on our website so everybody can come see the experience of how a worm farm works, what we do at Windswept Worm Farm, and how it's actually accomplished to produce worms and earthworm castings. Everything starts right here. We bring in 4 different kinds of manure: pre-consumer produce waste, recycled newspaper, and sawdust. All of that comes in from our dump truck. We dump it in the big pit here area, and we mix it all up. And so it starts out looking a lot like this. Now, the reason that we want to use different kinds of feedstocks is because each type of feedstock that we feed a worm brings in a different set of microorganisms and nutrients to the end product of our worm castings. A worm will eat anything, as long as it's not plastic, metal, glass, or a rock. But a single food source fed to a worm doesn't produce the kind of worm casting that we like to bag up and make available to product. We're going to walk over to the digester for the next step of where this stuff goes before it becomes worm food. From the dump pit, where we mix all of our different feedstocks together, then the material moves into our in-vessel thermal composter that you see behind me. All of the material is dumped into this hopper, where it is ground up a little bit, mixed, and runs through this conveyor belt up to the top of our in-vessel composter. Now, this composter is basically no different than a regular compost pile, except in the fact that it turns the material 4 times a day automatically on a timer, and it also continuously pumps fresh air into the bottom of the pile and lets that statically raise through the entire pile of composting material. We do this for 2 reasons. We need the oxygen in there to keep the aerobic bacteria working. Anytime you get a compost pile that has a foul odor to it, it's because it's not getting enough oxygen. The anaerobic bacteria, or bacteria that like low levels of oxygen, are the ones that typically produce a foul odor. So by pumping fresh oxygen through the pile continuously, we make sure all of the right conditions are there for the proper microorganisms to grow inside the compost pile itself. And we'll walk around to the back of the machine where it's unloaded, and I'll show you what the product looks like after it's been composted. Once the compost has been in the digester for 3 to 5 days, what we're looking for is to get the temperature up above 140 degrees for a minimum of 3 days. What that does is kill off any harmful pathogens such as E. coli and Salmonella, and it also kills off any weed seeds that might have come in the manures or the pre-consumer produce waste that we use. And this is what it looks like when it comes out. And as you can tell, it's steaming. It's fairly warm. It's about 130 degrees inside the digester right now. This is what we use to feed our worms. And we'll come over to the big worm bed next, and I'll show you how we go about feeding the worms.
Go ahead.
Once the material has been run through the digester, then we bring it over to one of our worm beds. This is what we call a continuous flow machine. It's a worm bed that never has to be harvested to remove the castings. We start by loading this machine here, which is considered a gantry feeder. Take a skid steer loader, dump the material in the top. This runs the entire length of the worm bed, which is 87 feet long and 8 feet wide. And then it slowly augers that material out. We add between 1 and 2 inches of material every week to the worm beds. We do this for 2 reasons. One, to make sure that the worms digest everything that we feed them. We give them a limited amount of food in a limited amount of time. Secondly, if you pile up too much food for them, it will generate heat and be an uncomfortable place for the worms to live. You can see this is some of the material I brought over, and you can see how clumpy it looks all over the worm bed. That's what it looks like when we put it on. After about 2 to 3 days, the worm bed basically becomes very smooth. I call it the golf course effect. It's very smooth across there. When that happens, we know that the worms have eaten all of the material in there and are ready to be fed again. This worm bed sets on a screen wire, so there's actually no solid bottom to it. We do this so we can loosen and scrape the bottom part of the castings off. The worm bed will settle down, and then we can feed on the top again and scrape the castings out from underneath. Once the castings are scraped out from underneath this worm bed, they go into this machine right here, which is a trommel screening machine or a worm harvester. The first screen on this is an 1/8 inch in diameter, and the second screen on this is also an 1/8 inch in diameter. The third screen is 1/4 inch. Now, what we're looking for is to separate out things that wouldn't want to be bagged up as product. Everything that comes through an 1/8 inch screen, we know that the worms have digested it and it is manure. So when we bag our product up, we know we're bagging up 100% worm castings. The things that come out in the second part of the screen are some of the baby worms that are very small, and the worm cocoons, or how the worms reproduce. They look very similar to little green eggs. Inside each one of those little green eggs, there will be 3 to 5 viable worms that will take between 90 and 128 days for those baby worms to hatch out of the cocoon. The last thing that comes out is the worms and anything that they didn't digest or break down properly. So we get some of the material in balls and clumps like this, along with a big spaghetti pile of worms, as it were. From here, our product goes over to our bagging operation, and we'll go over and look at that next. After the worm castings have been screened through the the harvester, the worm castings come out like this. It's very fine. Of course, it's been screened at an 1/8 inch. It has the texture of dirt and the odor of damp soil, maybe after a rain or something. The worm castings are full of beneficial microorganisms, humic acid, and mycorrhizae, all beneficial things to help make our plants grow healthy and strong. The humic acid will act like a root stimulator to make the root system of your plant grow large and healthy, and the beneficial microorganisms help those root systems feed more thoroughly on the soil that they're in, so you get a larger and healthier plant. Once the material comes over to this stage, it's ready to be bagged up and shipped out to the local garden centers for people to purchase and use in their lawn and garden. This is the two sizes of bags that we bag up. This is a 15-pound bag, and this is our 5-pound bag of Nature's Own worm castings. Here at Windswept Worm Farm, we raise 2 different species of worms. Most of the worms that we raise at Windswept Worm Farm are Acenia fetida, or red wigglers. They're a very small worm. They're used mainly for composting. These are the guys that do most of the work around here. We have about 4.5 million of these little guys on site at any given time. We use these worms because they're the most efficient composter. A pound of red wiggler worms will consume at least 3 to 5 pounds of organic matter every week. So this little guy will eat 5 to 7 times his own weight of material every week. The second type of worm that we raise at Windswept Worm Farm is Acenia hortense, or also known as European night crawlers. We raise these worms because they're extremely suitable for fishing bait. As you can see, these are much larger size worms, and these are the ones that we cup up and sell for fishing bait. They're the same kind of worm as the red wiggler, as where they're a composting worm. They're just not as efficient at doing the composting, even though they're bigger. One thing that you might have noticed while we were doing the little tour of our worm farm here is we're not exactly inside a typical building. Our worm farm is in the underground storage facility and in the caves. These caves were mined out for the limestone around 60 or 70 years ago, and they're now rented out for warehouse space. The reason we have our worms in the underground cave is the constant temperature and humidity down here. The temperature stays between 52 and 60 degrees year-round. This way we can prevent our worms from freezing in the wintertime or getting too hot in the summertime and not being active. So by being in the cave, it's a perfect environment for these worms to live, and they can be productive and active year-round.